Hello again, everybody. Gary Furman and Stephen Wagner here, and this is your Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. As the Miami Hurricanes wrapped up their second big visit weekend of the month of June this weekend on campus, and a massive weekend. I don't know how these coaches do it, to be honest with you. They host visitors all weekend, then they have camps on Sunday. They had Legends Camp on Sunday. All the former players in. It's a lot. And you could kind of see the fatigue in the eyes of a lot of Miami coaches there as that Legends Camp kind of wound down mid-afternoon on Sunday. They were ready to go home and get some sleep, but that doesn't mean they didn't get a lot of work done this weekend. And Stephen, let's talk a little bit about it. A guy that I'm getting increasingly excited about that, it makes a lot of sense for Miami to land him, but I just like the direction I see this going, and that's offensive lineman Canon Picket. We saw him over the weekend, and man, this is a massive dude. All the Pickett guys have been big kids and all that, and Booker, obviously a very good player for Miami. Canon looks like he's the biggest of all of them now. Talk a little bit about what you saw and heard from Canon Picket this weekend.
Yeah, Cannon's a guy that we've expected Miami to land for a really, really long time. I entered an RPM for him back in, I think at this point it was like last September or last October or something like that. This is a guy we've expected to be a Hurricane since he was like 12 or 13 years old. He's always liked Miami a lot. I'd even go so far as to say, at this stage of his recruitment, he's probably a lot higher on Miami than Booker Pickett, his older brother, ever was. It seemed like, with Booker, there were a few different directions he could go. With Cannon, we've pretty much always ultimately expected him to end up at Miami. Yeah, honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't happened already yet. But I think it's a matter of when, not a matter of if he comes to Miami. He already took an official visit to Clemson, and he has an official visit coming up to Florida next week. But man, I think it would be pretty freaking stunning if he didn't end up a Hurricane. I see Miami probably ending up with either 6 or 7 offensive linemen in this class ultimately. I 1000% expect Cannon to be one of them.
Well, I'm not as good as you. I should have backed up your RPM back in the fall. I remember you when you made it. And I don't know. I didn't. It's not like I didn't feel good about it because I've always have. But I don't know. I just never followed through and did the RPM. Well, I did earlier this over the weekend. Put in an RPM for him as well, and expecting a commitment at some point here. This is going to be commitment season over the next month, and we should see several of them. And I would be very surprised if Canon Picket isn't one of them at some point here over the next few weeks. All right, another guy that I wanted to talk about, Stephen, who is committed, is number 1 prospect Jackson Cantwell. We covered him with unbelievable fanfare, which is deserved for the number 1 recruit in the country. He has been recruiting for Miami ever since. All over social media, throwing up the U, sending little sly signals. One of them this weekend was with Mr. Canon Picket, which certainly influences our thoughts a little bit. I showed him and Brock Kalelj, who we'll also talk about on this show, during their official visits this weekend, with kind of like I think it was like a wink or something like that. Listen, those recruitments are going well. Like we said, we think Pickett will be in the Miami fold, and I think there's a great chance that Kalelj will be too. And I did an RPM for him earlier as well. I can't remember if I saw yours in there already, if I was backing you up or not, but I did go out on the limb on that one. And my percentages are pretty decent, hovering somewhere around the 50-60% mark on RPM. So that's not bad. And I'm not super aggressive with them, but now that Azubi's gone, I feel compelled to dive into the fray with Steven a little bit more. And I did enter an RPM for him as well. But talking about Cantwell first, a chance to come in on an official visit. I left early on Sunday morning, which kind of made our lives a little bit more complicated in talking to him. But when you finally did speak to him, Stephen, what did you get from Jackson Cantwell?
Yeah, Cantwell's as locked in as I think you can be. He said he was going to shut down immediately after committing, and he did exactly that. I know obviously, everyone kind of holds their breath with a prospect like Cantwell, the number one overall player in the country. There are a lot of fans who are going to feel like, man, he is not a Hurricane until he literally signs and submits that paperwork. But I got to tell you, there has been absolutely zero drama with Jackson Cantwell since he committed. He doesn't want any more drama. He's a Hurricane. He's locked in. He feels really good. He told me, I think about a week or so after he committed, he said, man, the entire coaching staff would suddenly have to be fired, unexpectedly in order for him to not be a Hurricane. And obviously that's not going to happen. And so I would be absolutely stunned if he's not a Hurricane. Come December. He is really excited about Miami. He feels really, really good about that commitment. He's not going anywhere. He's not entertaining any other schools. He's not going on any other official visits. It's Miami and nobody, and that's exactly the way he likes it.
There's another guy that I'm feeling really, 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 really good about. And I like what he was saying this weekend, and that's defensive end Bryce Perry-Wright, the guy with the two last names. He is considering Clemson, Texas, and Texas A&M in addition to Miami. But when we spoke to him this weekend, Bryce made a statement that really resonated with me, and I'm assuming that it probably did with you as well, where he talked about there's only one coach recruiting him that has a gold jacket. And look, we've been looking for the last few years for the presence of Jason Taylor to pay big dividends in recruiting, and it has to a certain degree, but it's still nice to hear that a young man who's being recruited, a high-quality defensive end like Bryce Perry-Wright, is enamored by the idea of being coached by Jason Taylor. Seems to us like Miami is going to be a contender here in this race. And your thoughts on Bryce Perry-Wright?
Yeah, so coming into the visit, it kind of seemed like Clemson was probably the school that was in the best position. He's a Clemson legacy, but Miami, I think, has gained more ground than anyone here over the last 3 months. Miami really wasn't in his picture that much in February and March. Then finally in April, the Hurricanes were able to get him on campus. They made a really, really big impression. He canceled his Georgia official visit in favor of a trip to Miami. I think that was 2 months ago or something like that. Earlier last week, after he'd already taken an official visit to Auburn, and I think he might have visited one other school, but I can't really remember. But after he'd already taken an official visit to Auburn, he went ahead and cut his list of schools from 6 to 4 and included Clemson, Miami, Texas, and Texas A&M. The fact that Miami has gone from a school that he wasn't even really thinking about to a school that he's not only official visiting, but a school that he named one of his 4 finalists, in the span of 2 months. I mean, that is really, really significant. He's Ray Lewis's nephew. I'm sure that's absolutely played a part. And he told me, I remember talking to him back at the All-American game in San Antonio back in January, and he was telling me that he had Ed Reed telling him why he needed to come to Miami. He was having Ray Lewis's former teammates make a pitch to him about why you need to come to Miami. Damian Lewis played with Bryce Perry-Wright's uncle, excuse me. Damian Lewis played with Bryce Perry-Wright's uncle, Ray Lewis, on those teams in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Ray Lewis apparently has given good reviews of Damian Lewis, and Damian Lewis has, really leaned on that relationship that he had with Ray and, kind of the end that he has there. But Jason Taylor has also been massively involved. They think Bryce Perry-Wright could really be one of these Reuben Bain type defensive linemen that can really just kind of move across the field as you need him to. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind he has the strength and speed and bend to be able to be a pass rusher, but I also think he has the raw power to just straight up beat you in the middle of the field. And he certainly has a frame that is going to very easily allow himself to bulk himself up. Yeah, I mean, heck, if you go on his highlight tape from I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, but one of the first clips that he has at Buford is a clip of him sacking Luke Nickel. I do think that's pretty funny. But Luke Nickel, also was a guy with a pretty good pocket presence and played behind a pretty good offensive line. I really do think that Bryce Perry-Wright is a real stud. He's a consensus top 100 recruit. Everyone agrees this kid is going to be an absolute baller. I think Miami is absolutely going to have a chance to potentially climb up all the way to number 2. Clemson, I think, is probably the school that most of us are leading toward, but I very legitimately think Miami could go all the way to number 2. And then if they get it down to them and Clemson, I mean, who knows what can happen? If Miami's able to get it down to a mano-a-mano situation, I'm always going to like Mario Cristobal's odds and Jason Taylor's odds in this instance because, he told us this morning, someone asked him, uh, what separates Miami staff from some of these other staffs? What makes Miami staff a little bit different? And he said, well, one staff recruiting me has a Hall of Fame, or one staff recruiting me has a gold jacket, the others don't. And you were right. That was definitely a quote that stuck out.
And he did acknowledge Miami moved up this weekend. They do a great job with these visits. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, Gary, you're wearing orange and green colored sunglasses," but like, I am extremely impressed with how they handle. I mean, you're talking about a lot of kids coming in, 17, 15 kids on these visit weekends. And the in-house recruiting staff does a phenomenal job of organizing these visits. And a few of the key ones operate in anonymity. I think that's the way Mario likes it. Doesn't want other schools coming in and stealing his key staffers, but they do a great job of organizing these visits and almost universal approval, positive reviews every single visit weekend. And this weekend was certainly no different. Now, guy I mentioned earlier, Brock Kalelj, top offensive guard in the country, big, and big is a fair word here because he is big. A big priority for the Hurricanes on the offensive line, and they're getting just about everybody else they're targeting on the O-line. Steven, I said earlier I put in an RPM for Brock to come to Miami. I feel very good about this one. Head-to-head battle looks like with Georgia. Take it again, Kirby Smart. We're having some pretty good success recruiting against you these days, and hopefully that continues with Brock. Your thoughts on what he was thinking after his visit?
First off, it's Brett Kalelj. I learned
that's on me.
First off, I learned today. I've been saying his name wrong for months. His name is Kalelj.
I knew it was Brett. I've never heard that name before.
No. I'm saying his last name. His last name this entire time. I thought it was Kalelj. His parents corrected me. They said it's actually Kalelj. I had absolutely no idea. So apologies to the Kalelj family.
Mr. and Mrs. Kalelj, I hope I pronounced it correctly. I don't remember.
But I definitely think that the Hurricanes are in a pretty good position for him coming off of this visit weekend. I'm pretty optimistic about Miami's chances. Right now, I think, like you said, I do think this is a head-to-head battle between Miami and Georgia. Who knows right now, what direction he's actually going to go. I think it's a little bit of a coin flip. I literally think you could flip a coin and pick heads or tails, and that'll probably be as good a guess as any of us have at where he'll actually end up. Miami really did a good job with him on the visit this weekend. They did a particularly good job with his family, I think. His mother, I think, has been able to relate to Alex Mirabal, pretty tightly. His mother's a high school teacher. Alex Mirabal started his career as a football coach and high school history teacher at Miami Columbus. They've talked about that a lot. That's something that they actually have connected over. They really like and respect Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal as offensive line technicians. The staff thinks that he is the number one guard in America. I remember talking, to people, a really long time ago, like back in like January, and kind of, poking around trying to see, okay, what would what's the feel for, some of these top offensive linemen in the country? I asked someone, who do you think the number one overall offensive lineman in the country is? And they said Jackson Cantwell, no doubt. And you'd think to yourself, okay, well, that seems kind of obvious. He's literally the number one player in the country. Then I asked, okay, well, what about interior offensive linemen? They said Brett Kalelj, like absolutely Brett Kalelj, or in this case, Brett Kalelj. Um, but I think that Miami is in a really good position with his family. I think his family was pretty sold on the idea of him being a Hurricane after this visit. He still has a trip to Georgia coming up, and he's been pretty adamant that he is going to take all of his official visits before he makes a decision. He's not going to jump the gun. He's not going to rush things along. He's not going to make anything prematurely. But if I'm Miami, I mean, it's hard not to be optimistic about the position that they're in coming off of this most recent trip. I really don't think there's much left that Miami needs to do or anything that Miami could have done that they didn't do. I think the Hurricanes are in as good position now as they really will be. And, heck, I think that Georgia's probably in as good position as they will be. I mean, we've really been feeling like it's a Miami Georgia battle for like the last month and a half. Tennessee was in that mix a little bit too. There's some other schools here and there that got mentioned, but Miami and Georgia have consistently been the two names that we've heard since January. I expect it to be one of those two. Right now, if I had to absolutely pick one, I would pick Miami, maybe with a slight lean, like 55, 60%, somewhere in there. But I mean, you never know what Kirby Smart's going to be able to do either. Really interested to see how this one plays out, but there's a very, very good chance he ends up at Miami.
All right, and we've got stories on all these kids, all these visits on the website today. So, make sure you get on over to CaneSport.com. If you're not yet a subscriber, your subscriptions literally, you see it on the bottom of the screen, your subscriptions literally allow us to do everything that we do to try to make you guys the most informed fans in America. So please, 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 if you're not yet a subscriber, head on over to CaneSport.com, become a member of our great community of fans. You will not be sorry. Our message boards are phenomenal. We have a lot of really good fans on our site. We've been around since the start of the internet. Like I said, you will not be sorry if you come on over and become a member at CaneSport.com. All right. The Canes and the Irish are going to face off on August 31st in the season opener. Well, they're going head-to-head in recruiting right now for a wide receiver by the name of Braden Robinson. It's a Miami Notre Dame battle to the finish. Stephen, handicap it for us.
Yeah, he's another guy where I think it's kind of 50-50-ish, give or take, on whether he ends up at Miami or Notre Dame. The Hurricanes definitely made a move this weekend, and I think are in better position coming out of the weekend than they were going into the weekend. He told me earlier this spring, actually, that Miami and Notre Dame were kind of his 1A and 1B, and he's remained really, really consistent with that. Arizona has kind of snuck into the mix too, and I spoke with some people earlier today that kind of hinted that Arizona could be a kind of a sneaky team to watch, just because, quite frankly, he wouldn't have as much competition that he would have to face to be able to get on the field. He would pretty quickly go there and be, one of the better players that they have, as opposed to a place like Miami or a place like Notre Dame, where a player could, have a little bit of fear of getting lost on the roster or getting lost in the depth chart. But I really do think it'll be either Miami and Notre Dame. I think right now I probably lean toward the Irish. He has an official visit coming up to Notre Dame later this summer. I do think it's possible that Notre Dame really kind of runs away with it, but Miami really is right there. He's announcing on July 20th. He wants to take about a month or so to, kind of sit, chill, think things over. I personally think a month is a pretty long time to wait, but he really wants to commit on his mother's birthday. I probably lean toward that being Notre Dame right now, but Miami really is a school that's right there.
All right, a recruitment that I'm following really closely because I recognize obviously how important the defensive line position is to a football program, and Miami's been doing a great job recruiting the offensive line, and now heavy emphasis on defensive linemen in this class, and that's James Johnson. He's the #1 defensive lineman rated in America. He visited Miami this weekend. From everything that I heard, Stephen, he seemed to really be liking it, really be feeling the culture and atmosphere at Miami. Your thoughts on where the Canes stand right now with James Johnson, who really could pick a school out there all around the country?
Yeah, he's another recruit that has drawn, such significant national interest. He really could end up anywhere. We've kind of expected him to end up at Georgia for a while. Georgia was, the very clear, like well-defined, strong leader of the pack for a lot of last year and even earlier this spring. It really seemed like it was kind of Georgia's to lose. The race kind of tightened up a little bit earlier this summer. Or excuse me, earlier this spring. And it really felt like, Miami was right there. He transferred from Fort Myers to Miami Northwestern. I did not include him in the last mock class that I did, though. And, kind of the reason for that was he's not one of these traditional kids at Miami Northwestern that is, South Florida, born and raised. He doesn't have, Miami in his blood. He doesn't really have, a direct connection to the Hurricanes. Like say, like I don't know, like a Calvin Russell, or someone like that who, whose mother played for Miami, or a Reuben Bain who hasn't or who hadn't had an older brother on the Hurricane staff. Yeah, he's a kid from Fort Myers who's now playing at Miami Northwestern because he wanted to play against a really really good top level of competition. He wanted to be coached by Teddy Bridgewater, and he wants to continue to get that exposure and continue boosting his stock. And all of those good things. But if this was a kid that had more ties to Miami, I would probably lean a little bit more toward the Hurricanes. But I really think of this as no, this is just a kid from the state of Florida who happens to be playing at Miami Northwestern. I don't think that he'll end up at Miami right now. I think the Hurricanes are absolutely in this race, and I don't think it would be considered a surprise to anyone if he ended up a Hurricane. Right now, though, I do think I probably lean away from it a little bit.
All right, we'll continue to follow that one. Now, the Canes had a couple safeties. Well, actually, let me talk about it. The other defensive tackle first, because he's another huge priority, and it's Tyson Bacon, defensive tackle that was in this weekend. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's going to be Miami, or right now, it's a Miami-Florida battle. He has trips to Ohio State and Alabama coming up. Ohio State is obviously Ohio State. They won the national championship last year. They can just sell, man, you want to compete for a national championship? You want to be in the college football playoff? Come to Ohio State. But Damian Lewis and Jason Taylor have done a freaking awesome job with him, recruiting him to Miami. So has Mario Cristobal. I mean, he really does just like Miami. I mean, I think a lot of people forget that a lot of times in recruiting, it really can be simplified down to, does a kid like the school or not? Tyson Bacon's just a guy who likes Miami. Like he thinks it's a good school. He thinks it's a good program. He likes the idea of living in South Florida. He likes the lifestyle. He likes what Miami can offer. He likes the idea of putting on the Miami uniform and all that stuff. Now, that being said, Florida has also done a very good job. And he's going to take an official visit to Alabama, which is the flagship school in his home state of Alabama. So we're never going to totally count them out. But right now, it feels kind of this is another one that honestly feels kind of 50-50 between Miami and Florida. I'm maybe a slight lean toward Miami right now. I do think the Hurricanes are doing really well with him. He's listed as a 3-star, and like a top, like I think like 500 or 600 recruit or something like that. But Miami absolutely loves him. They are treating him like he is a 5-star defensive tackle. They are absolutely making the hardest push that they possibly can for him. They view him as one of these must-get defensive tackle prospects. I had someone tell me, that was a recruiting battle that they really felt like Miami needed to win. And they're certainly treating him like one.
All right, and the last couple kids I wanted to talk about on this show, we can't obviously talk about every single Miami recruit on this podcast, but like I said, we do have the stories are on the website, and encourage you guys to go there and get all the real nitty gritty inside with the obviously quotes from the players and things like that about their visits. But there were a couple of safeties in this weekend, and Steven, I know you had a chance to talk to both of them. I was curious how Miami ended up doing there. Tyreek Green and Devin Jackson. Safety is a big spot in recruiting. How are the Canes hanging in there with those guys?
Yeah, so with Green, it kind of feels like it could come down to Miami and Georgia. The Hurricanes feel pretty good about the position that they're in with Green after this weekend. He came down to Miami in March for a spring visit. He scheduled his Miami official visit while he was down there for the spring visit. He's looked forward to this visit for a long time. Seems like the Hurricanes really did a good job, but it feels like it's going to come down to the Hurricanes and the Bulldogs. Don't really know how Georgia feels right now, but those are the two schools that I would probably bet on. And then Devin Jackson. He was committed to Will Harris whenever he was at Florida. Um, it was actually committed along with Jalen Waters. Jalen Waters was down here on the official visit, and Jalen Waters, kind of made the best pitch that he could to Devin Jackson, saying, hey, I flipped. Well, didn't actually flip, but it essentially flipped from Miami to Florida back in the spring. I followed Will Harris from Florida to Miami. I feel great about that decision. Why wouldn't you come to Miami too? Now, LSU's also in the mix, Oregon's in the mix, Nebraska's in the mix, Florida is still in the mix, and there's one more school. I think it's Penn State off the top of my head, but might want to double check that in the story. But either way, there is still kind of a positive sense, or there is still some optimism for Jackson down there in Coral Gables. I think that the Hurricanes kind of feel like they're in a good spot for him. I included him in my last mock class. I still think that there's probably a pretty good chance that he'll end up at Miami. I do not know that for an absolute fact because, it's absolutely possible that, LSU is able to steer him away. It's absolutely possible that Oregon is able to, come in and really shake things up whenever he goes there on his official visit. Never count out Florida. I mean, he was committed there once. They could, he could conceivably commit there again. But I am optimistic about Miami, and I do lean toward him ending up in Coral Gables.
All right, so we're at the midway point now of this month of official visits, and like I said, we're expecting some commitments to start coming in here pretty soon. Your general synopsis on where you think Miami is right now?
Miami feels like they really are on track to get another top 5 class this year. There's still a ton of optimism in Miami that they are going to be able to get Tristan Keys to flip from LSU to Coral Gables. Messiah Hampton is a top 50 receiver who's going to come off the board here in a little less than a week. I think he's committing June 13th. We've heard Syracuse and Oregon as kind of the most mentioned names. Miami still has some optimism for him. Vance Spafford, another wide receiver, he's going to be coming down to Coral Gables later in the month, June 20th, for an official visit. There's a rumor on the street that he could potentially end up flipping to the Hurricanes whenever he gets down here later this month. Then you also look at guys like Lamar Brown, the 5-star athlete, defensive tackle, who came down for an official visit last weekend. The Hurricanes are still doing really, really well with him. Now, he does live basically in LSU's backyard, and he does go to a school that historically has been kind of the ultimate feeder school for LSU. Texas and Texas A&M are also going to, just throw a crap load of resources at him. He's already taken his Miami OV. He was at Texas this weekend. He'll visit LSU June 20th, and I think Texas A&M next week. So still a few directions that thing could go. But man, it really felt like Miami gained a ton of ground for him last week. So I really do think that there is a really good chance that this is going to be another top 5 class. I mean, whenever I'm kind of looking at the list of guys that I think are going to end up at Miami, I see 4-star, 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 5-star, 5-star, 4-star, 4-star, and then a couple of 3-stars that they have really good evaluations on here or there. I'm really excited to see where this is going to go because I really, really do think there is an awesome chance Miami ends up with another top 5 class.
All right. And we obviously will be there every step of the way to cover it for you guys. Again, if you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, head on over to the website. become a member, and you will get the inside scoop on all of these recruiting battles that Miami is involved in, and a whole lot more. So CaneSport.com is your place. And that's going to do it for today's Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Gary Furman. We thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time, everybody.